everyone. Welcome to part 2 of chapter 3. We left off with the how language is powerful and talking about the linguistic determinism and relativity. Now let's move on to some language acquisition theory. So this basically just talks about how your language develops, and some people who influence it. So one theory is language explosion theory, and just a reminder, it's in green letters, so this doesn't come from your textbook, it comes from another OralComm textbook. So one is language explosion theory. So this is saying that we have a core of language that we develop early in life. So it usually starts with the primary dyad, two people. Usually it's the person who spoke to the child as the most. So that could be mother and child, that could be maybe sibling and child, but basically whoever that other very important person was in that child's life is part of the primary dyad. So now with this, it can also extend to secondary influences, such as maybe a teacher or someone else who's plays a significant influence on that person. So, yeah. Now, with the significant other theory, this one says that we select specific groups and their language, ideas, they influence us, how we speak, also some things that we consider important. So with significant other theory, says that we have no theory or identity basically in relationship to others. So what does that mean? So let's say the captain of some type of team. Well, if that team doesn't exist, then how are you the captain? So it's that kind of thing. Also, our understanding of self is built by how others react to language, ideas, beliefs. So you don't know if you're extreme or if people think that you are weird because if you don't get that reaction from them. So that's what it means by we kind of understand ourselves and where we line on some type of spectrum, because of others, so that you know where the extreme is. Also, with significant other theory, it says that we select our language and our values by our significant others' reactions to our choices. So not just how we speak, but also maybe if we even think something is important. Like maybe you have, back when we were going to classes in person, maybe you had someone who thought, oh, well, it's not important to be to that person's class on time because all they do is just go over what we did last, class session, or they just tell us about whatever. So because this person who is significant to you thinks that, okay, this is not important, then you may develop that same type of attitude. And says, and significant others can change over time, meaning that just because, say, your best friend may be what you consider significant other, and yes, let me just be clear about something. Significant others does not mean someone that you're married to or anything like that. It could just be someone who you're very close with or has like significant influence in your life. But these people change over time. So your best friend from 5th grade may not be your best friend now. You may not even talk to that person, but you may talk to your spouse or a coworker way more. So that's what it means by significant others can change over time. So what was that? Oh, so some cultural variations. So conversation style is how individuals exchange their thoughts, opinions, and feelings. So let's get into some of these over: direct, indirect, elaborate, understated, all of that. So So, so the styles can be. It doesn't have to be a cultural thing. Yes, there are a lot of cultural influences that can affect these, but that doesn't mean everyone from one particular culture talks a specific way. So, but it's kind of more of a generalization. But there are always exceptions. Also, this can change based on you could grow up, within a certain communicate way that people communicate, but that doesn't mean that you have to stick that way. Stick to that. Maybe just as you get more comfortable with communicating, maybe you decide to adopt a different way of talking to people. So with direct versus indirect, and where something I wanted to go over. Okay, so with a direct style, that's more straightforward. It tells exactly, it gets to the point, tells you exactly what a person wants. Now, indirect is less obvious. When you think of, say, passive aggressiveness, that's more indirect. So, an example where it says the dog is hungry versus would you feed the dog. So, indirect is saying, okay, the dog is hungry, and just hoping that you do, what someone wants you to do and feed the dog. Now, direct would be just asking, hey, would you feed the dog, please? So that's the difference between direct versus indirect. So with elaborate versus understated. Understated uses modest language, kind of strategically, is silent in certain areas. So, for an example, with the reporter asking, how does it feel to be the defensive player on the year? Well, an understated statement would be, it's something I've been working on. So it doesn't mean, oh, we worked for this in every single, day, and this is, what we've been focused on all year. It's an understated thing where it doesn't tell you everything about the whole journey to get there, but it just, it does cover it a little bit. Now, an elaborate way of an elaborate verbal style would use a lot more adjectives, exaggerations, expressions, such as the next one where it says, she finished, saying that someone finished the race versus weary and out of breath, she stumbled headfirst over the line. They're both saying the same thing, but one uses a lot more detail and description for it. With honorific versus personal. And so, and they also, in the textbook, it gives like some regions where these verbal styles are prominent. So, with honorific versus personal, a person's status in life affects the conversation, period. Whether they're a boss or whether they're rich or maybe someone who's a beginner at something. So it uses a lot of titles. So maybe address someone as, say, chairman or chairperson, whatever the person's last name, Chairperson Smith. Or also works on turns to speak. So it's not like, okay, well, the leader has to speak first. Might be the thing. Or all the people who work under this person, they speak first. And then the person who has the most clout, maybe they speak last. So it just depends on the structure of whatever environment that this occurs. Also, word choice. So there's a lot more careful with the words that are chosen to speak to people. Now, with personal, this type of verbal style uses quality over equality and being personal. So you may not use, say, titles. So, for example, in the South, a lot of times, just out of respect, people may call someone Mr. and that person's first name. It may not be, Mr. Smith. It may be Mr. John, just because it still adds that little bit of respect. But in some northern areas of the United States, they may just call a person John. So just because they don't really stress that. Also, personal stresses, first name usage. So it may just be John instead of, Mr. whatever the person's name. Also, elders, superiors, there's a lot more talking to them as if they're equal, as if, regardless of however many years you have in this particular industry or whatever, they still talk as if, you're both at the same level. So, with instrumental versus effective. Now, with instrumental, that deals more with getting the job done, more goal-oriented. You don't have to hear a bunch of backstories, kind of just pretty cut and dry. So for example, directions. If you open up some type of box for some type of device, the directions don't give you a backstory. Well, in order to be effective at setting up, some type of, toaster or cooker or microwave, whatever, you don't have to understand why the company was founded or the relationship that the founder of the company had with their parents. No, it's just, press time, cook, press whatever button, press start, whatever. So with directions, or, you don't get all that. You don't have to have a mutual understanding. It's like, the first thing you need to understand before you use this microwave is no. It's not like, okay, it's been through a lot. The company, does such and such for its employees. You don't need all that for instrumental verbal style. Now, with effective tends to be more process oriented. Now, this is, think of the transactional model that we talked about in chapter 1. This is where the person is speaking, but also they're seeing how the person's reacting to what's being said. So if I'm talking to you and I notice that you're frowning to something that I don't think, you may not, I wouldn't want you to frown to, well then guess what? I may adjust my message based on that. So it's not just cut and dry. You may intend on saying something one particular way, and then you, because of the feedback, even if it's just nonverbal feedback or because of the environment, you may adjust your message based on that. So it's not just cut and dry. Sometimes you may have to say, okay, well, the reason why I said this was because of blank, 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 blank. So effective, it's more kind of weaves its way and adjusts to try and get to whatever the goal is. Goal-oriented, just the instrumental is just goal-oriented, cut and dry, just shoots it out there. Now, also silence is also a verbal style. So it can still say things just by not saying something. So it can show thoughtfulness and respect. So I know you've heard sometimes, or maybe people are so quick, you're not really listening, you're just basically waiting to speak. So sometimes you may be saying something that you think people may need to mull over, but if they just shoot right back at you, it's like, I'm wondering, did that person really listen to what I was saying? Did that really sink into what they were saying? So sometimes silence can just show that you're thinking about it, or it can just be a sign of respect to just not jump in as soon as you think you have something to say. Also, depending on the culture, the powerful people, don't talk too much, or don't reveal too much about themselves. And let's see, there's something else I wanted to mention on this. Oh, and in some cultures, silence can be an uncomfortable thing. So it says, in Western countries or individualistic cultures, is often, parentheses, within seconds viewed as painful and as uncomfortable. So just someone may be trying to fill that silence just because where they come from, or how they were raised, it seems awkward. So not to everybody, but maybe to that person, or because of their background. Let's see, was there anything else I want to say about this? Yeah. One of the things that said about silence was in Japanese culture, it is generally associated with wisdom and power. A person who talks too much and self-discloses a great deal is considered less powerful than one who keeps personal opinions and knowledge private. So, some other stuff on the silence. Now, going into gender. So, on the I know some of you may be thinking, okay, when we're going to talk about gender, maybe, okay, well, the whole, was it men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and a whole bunch of different, elaborate keys to understanding the language of of your opposite gender. But a lot of research have found out that usually there's more similarities than differences. Now, there is that 15% of difference. Now, this means that men and women, or males and females, do have some differences, but it's not like the way that they speak or the way that they express themselves. Guys may say, this particular way of expressing themselves more often than, say, a female. Now, this doesn't mean that females don't use it. It just means that they use it to a lesser degree. So it's not like there's words that only guys say and words that only females say. So, yeah, these tendencies, none of them are exclusive to this is just guy words. So, context, age, setting, status, all of these have a greater influence on the verbal differences between males and females. I don't think, is there anything else that I wanted to say? Oh, but for those of you who are like, oh, there's got to be some type of difference. Well, okay, we'll get to a little bit of that right now. So, just some of the highlights. So, certain female language features, maybe using intensive words such as really or awfully. Talking about emotions when talking about something. I was excited, so that's why I did such and such. Longer sentence length. Let's see. Oh, Hedges. We are sort of out of food, and ending a statement with maybe a question like, okay, let's go to Hardee's. Is that all right? So now male language features may be judgmental adjectives, just flat out saying that, hey, that's a dumb idea. Let's see. Yeah, a lot of references to I. So anyway, let's see, was there anything else that I wanted to say? Not really. Okay. Moving on. So, with using language effectively, being authentic, just, present yourself honestly as how you are. So now, without being, offensive to other people. Also being encouraging. So with being encouraging, so that even just small talk shows that you're interested in another person, which makes you more approachable. Say using the I and the we when offering criticism. So instead of saying you failed, you could say maybe we weren't able to do such and such. So including yourself there instead of just pointing the finger. Also avoiding trigger words. So you have an idea of what trigger words are, but I'll say it anyway. They are verbal expressions that arouse emotions, creating intense psychological noise in the other person. Trigger words are often sexist, homophobic, racist, or xenophobic. So, yeah, you want to avoid those. And being appropriate. So, profanity, obscenities, abusive language, you want to avoid those. And gender neutral, now that one can be tough. I'll give you a couple of examples that are listed in the textbook. So say instead of man and wife, couple, partners, spouses, instead of chairman, chairwoman, congressman, chair or chairperson or congressperson. And there are a lot more in the textbook on page 84. And last slide on being clear. So you want to avoid or carefully avoid or carefully use. Doesn't mean that all of these are 100% never use them, but sometimes just be careful in how you use them or when. So using, for example, slang or informal language of a particular group. If you're wanting to seem more professional, then slang may not be the route for you. Or if you're talking to someone who's not of that particular group, then you may not want to use that slang. Cliches, so words that are used so often that they've lost their effect. For example, phrases like needless to say or to tell the truth. So you can cut those out of sentences and still it makes sense. Fillers, sounds such as like like, just words that you throw in while you're usually coming up with the next thing to say. So filler sounds, definition of it, sounds or words or phrases that serve no purpose, do not help communicators understand each other, and may become distracting. Idioms, so phrases that have a meaning different from what the individual words mean, can actually be and can be culturally specific. So not every place in the world may have the understanding of what it means to drop the ball. So this is not literally dropping the ball, but it means like to fail in some kind of way. Yeah, it says have a meaning different from the individual words. And let's see, euphemisms. So mild or indirect words or expressions substitute for harsher, more blunt ones. Blunt ones to make the meaning more palatable. So euphemisms doesn't mean that you have to not use them, but just be careful. Some examples would be saying someone passed away. Or maybe using the phrase, he is, no longer with us. So, as another way of saying someone passed, but also it could be another way of saying that that person doesn't work here, or it may be that that person got fired. But anyway, keeping with the death theme, also saying that someone kicked the bucket. So it may be a harsh way of saying, an easier way of saying something else. So, so that is it for our chapter 3, and I'll see you next time.